it's a nice spice towards the end, so you can see how that spice has been dialed up. But I still think you get. The gin is still there. It's not a case that it's disappeared. So then we come on to the Ransom, which is your second to last one, which is this one here. So this, as I said, was released in 2008. It's bottled at 44%. It is designed to, in the style of a 19th century US gin. That's the aim that they were going for. And I think that part of where the idea of the cask comes from is that if it was shipped somewhere to the US, by the time it made it inland in barrels, and also depending on what the weather was, it's much hotter here in certain places anyway, and at certain times of the year than it is in the UK, most of the year, then you would have more of the impact of the barrel, and I think that's that's part of the inspiration. As with most of these things, a lot of it is about inspiration for making a product as opposed to recreation. It's inspired by, as opposed to we want to make it exactly the same, because as I said before, inferior quality alcohol, why would you?
Do you know what the base spirit is on that one?
The base spirit is a mix of malted barley again and corn, and it's aged in Pinot Noir barrels.
What state is this out of?
Oregon.
Oregon, thank you. I couldn't remember.
It uses a Sherry-tail lemon still on that.
Thoughts on this one?
You just saying that they're using a Sherry-tail? Oh yes, of course. Stop.
I think you also get some of the citrus. Quite a lot of the citrus comes through in the middle, I think, on this one. Great. Yeah.
David, is there an ideal ABV for gin? What do you think the ideal level should be?
Oh, for Old Tom or in general?
Old Tom and in general.
Old Tom, if you're aging it, I think you might want a slightly higher ABV. If you're going for sort of one of the first two styles, the botanically sweetened or the sugar sweetened, then actually probably you want to be a little bit lower. So somewhere maybe between 40 and 45 for that, particularly for that style. And this is only my opinion. Oh, I did it again. Sorry. I keep thinking this is the microphone. This is what the problem is. That way. If the gin is aged, then I think I would probably have a slightly higher ABV, because I think that works better with gin that's, what was the euphemism I used? Interactive with wood. I think that's as that catch-all. But for gin in general, I think it kind of depends, and I think actually there's a difference if you're making gin in the UK or you're making it in the US, because there are different considerations. But from a flavour point of view, I like something generally between about 42 and 47, something like that tends to be quite a nice sweet spot. But I do quite like strong gin. That's a very much a personal preference. Like I like cardamom, but I don't like clove. It's kind of so that's a very personal thing. But I think if you want to mix a gin in cocktails and things like that, then you want to have some punch behind it. That said, with Old Tom, of course, the ABV is a little bit less important, particularly if you've gone for something that's, however you sweetened it or if you've sweetened it or not. If you've gone for something that's more botanically intense, then the flavours are going to come through a lot more when you're mixing it. And I think that's sometimes where it's kind of a combination of that. It's the intensity of your botanicals and also your ABV, and they are the two things that can make it, I think, make a more successful gin, because it means that it'll stand up when you mix it. There's nothing worse than having a gin and tonic and going, gin and tonic, vodka tonic, I don't know. So I think that's part of it. And this, you think of something like Ransom, and you can really see how the differences between like the Ransom, the Jensens, the Haymans, how if you just mix them in like a sweet martini, so not even martinet, just sweet martini, like two or three parts of gin, 1 part red vermouth or something like that, you could really see how those flavours would interact quite differently. I mean, the herbal, sort of deep herbal flavours that the Ransom has are going to interplay differently with the vermouth than, say, the lighter aspects of something like the Hayman's. I mean, it's not exactly light in flavour, but it's in comparison. It's, I mean, the Ransom's really got a big punch to it, I think. So, yeah, and so that leads us on to the final one, which is Corsair Major Tom, which I quite like because I'm a bit of a Bowie fan. So, so this is 44% ABV, and this is based on the same botanicals as their. They make a sort of contemporary New Western gin, so it's the same botanical mix as that, and some of those botanicals are juniper, coriander, orange, lemon, orris, and angelica. Those classic six again. That's just some of the botanicals. It's lightly aged, and then it's sweetened with tupelo honey, I believe that's how you pronounce it. But yeah, it's sweetened with honey. So yet another different sort of sweetening that you can have. So you've got, you know, there's a botanical sweetening, and we've talked a few about different botanicals that you can do, but licorice as well. And then there's like a sugar. Some the Old Tom out of Spring 44 in Colorado uses agave, I believe, and this one uses honey. So I'll show you the bottle as well. I didn't.
Could you run through the botanicals again? There's something that I'm getting almost like a celery.
Curry celery. That's
Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah, it's the six classic. It's juniper, coriander, angelica, orange, lemon, and orange. And orris. It's angelica seed, I believe.
Angelica seed, yeah. Thanks.
But I think the honey really comes through. I mean, you can tell that it's not sweetened with sugar. There's the honey in there. There is another honey gin out of Vermont, which is not really an Old Tom, but it's a juniper distillate mixed with honey, which is quite. If you ever get a chance to try it, it's worth trying. It's called Bar Hill. It's not an Old Tom, but it's juniper and honey, and the honey that they use has just got such a piney, beeswaxy intensity. It's quite something else. But it's so yeah. There's a lot to be had with the idea of playing around with gin and honey and gin and maple. Maple gin used to be a product of Buffalo in New York City, actually. Good for many different. They were a sponsor of like a Pan-American exhibition, I think, in 1905 or something like that. I had a booklet, actually. I had one of the original booklets, and it had all the cocktail recipes in it and all the supposed medical benefits of that, melancholic, and if you were of a nervous disposition, drink your maple gin down. It was just gin and maple syrup. That was all it was. But it was quite nice. So that's the straight. That's what we've got there. Does anyone have any questions at this point? No question.
Yeah, actually, how is the Old Tom category growing, both here in the States and in UK and Europe?
So there was and actually I've just realised, my sincere apologies, I just realised I gave you a wrong date for the Hayman's. The Hayman's is not 2008, it's before that, because there was actually quite a large expansion of gin around about, of Old Tom gin around about 2007, so actually that was the date, my apologies. Because I think in that year there was like 4 or so different Old Toms came out, and a lot of them had 2007 on the bottle. So that was actually like one of the biggest boom years that there was, and then since then it's actually been a bit quieter, because the Dorchester had an Old Tom specifically made for them. I think it's made by Grants, actually, who make Hendrix, basically. They made their Old Tom, although they have a new Old Tom gin now made specifically for the hotel. There were 2 out of Germany. One was called Both's, which is a sugar sweetened one, which has if you've ever seen that like 70s wallpaper that's slightly furry, that's what the label is. It's kind of interesting. And then there was the Secret Treasures as well, which, as I said, was one of the ones that was botanically sweetened. And actually, I haven't mentioned, just realised, there is a gin out of Norway called Golden Cock gin. This is what it's, and that actually dates from the 1940s, and it has been made continuously all that time. But because Norway's not a huge drinking sort of place, and a lot of their stuff isn't exported, certainly drinks-wise, and they have a lot of very strict laws. Most people hadn't heard of it, and I actually had to wait until a lady who works for a Norwegian company that makes it was in London, and we met up, sort of, a sort of surreptitious, here are the bottles, kind of thing. They come in it's an absolutely lovely bottle. It looks a bit like a Cointreau bottle with the square with the curve, but then it has sort of these grooves, quite Art Deco in that style. The interesting thing is it tastes quite a lot like this. And although I think the quality of the alcohol would have improved, the recipe hasn't changed. And so certainly in the 1940s, what they were making was something that was not dissimilar in a style to something like the Haymans, which was kind of it was quite interesting, I thought. And I spoke to the lady, and she didn't realise why I was so excited about, effectively, there was this spirit that had lasted the time when everyone thought that Old Tom had died out. There was this one spirit in the fjords of Norway still sort of doing its thing. So there we go. I think you'll see, I think more, as craft increases, I think you might see more Old Toms released as an alternative, perhaps to releasing a yellow gin or an aged gin or something like that, because maybe they want to not just play around with wood, but they want to play around with maybe some sweetening, maybe some botanicals. There's a lot of cocktail applications for Old Tom, and I think that appeals to a lot of people.
Are you aware of the Old Tom by Downslope Distilling?
I am. The Old Tom, O-U-L-D, which is where I got the name from. It's in here. But yeah, another fine example. I believe that's all. They don't make any other gin apart from the Old Tom gin. I believe. Certainly when I first met them, that's what I believe.
From our perspective, in terms of what we've seen in the market, you definitely get inroads from bartenders more so than the public currently. Yeah, because they love it because it's different. It's different. Yeah, there's so much more to play with as well. I mean, as I was saying, you can play around with bold botanicals. I mean, that's the thing. It's meant to have bold flavors. So you can have bold flavors. You can play around with different botanicals being higher up, and not people saying, "Oh, this doesn't predominantly taste of juniper." So. And you can play around with aging and sweetening. It's a real. You can really play with it and make some really nice spirits. And there's no regulation about what Old Tom is, so there are some general consensuses, but I'm sure many people would argue with those. So there is no regulation. So you kind of do what you like. Personally, I think that if you just age it, to my mind, I don't think that's an Old Tom. I think that's an aged gin, and I think that. It would be good to keep Old Tom as something else and keep yellow gin as what it is. Otherwise, it's just going to create confusion. And there are some, and actually I have another one here. If anyone hasn't had enough Old Tom gin, keep it under the counter, which is Liberator. So this is based on, it's the same botanical recipe as their normal gin, but they have played around again. They've adjusted the balance. So I think they've pulled down the citrus and upped the spice a little bit. I think the best bet is just to. I haven't got any more glasses, so if you've got one that's vaguely clean, that'll be what I'll pour it in.
All of mine are totally clean. You keep using the phrase aged gin, but correct me if I'm wrong, but is aged gin still not a category in the United States?
In the United States, yes. You're quite right.
It doesn't exist.
Yes. There are. Let me have a think of all of the various names that people give to aged. Oh, it's not sweet. There is. So you have yellow gin, amber gin. I quite like amber gin actually. I'm growing on that one. Brown gin, which is suggested as being a more palatable alternative to yellow gin, which I'm not sure how that would. There's matured gin.
Rested gin, barrel aged gin, aged gin.
You can't call it barrel aged.
Not in the US. No, that's quite
You
right.
can't call it barrel aged.
Not in the United States.
Why not?
Because TTB says that gin is an unaged spirit.
Big Gin got away with bourbon barrel.
Yeah,
say barrel,
there's a
you
couple
can't say-
labels out there, and then the
Yeah.
TTB came back and said, oh, no, we didn't do that.
Yeah, they're one of the first ones that they took the kibosh.
Because the TTB does say that it has to, the gin is an unaged spirit, period, straight up, yeah, period.
Yeah, so if, no matter how long you put it in a barrel,
You can't sell it as
you
an
can't
aged spirit.
say anything about the age.
You can have it that long, but you can't sell it as an aged
Exactly, you
spirit.
can't label it as age, you can,
Right.
yeah, you can put barrel condition.
There's also
You can't say anything about how long or.
You can't say 4 years aged
this is
gin.
What about the sweetening? I mean, does that
This is out of where?
TTP label?
No, not at all. You can technically use it whatever you want. As long as it's an approved thing.
Yeah, they have to approve that formula.
Yeah, but that, I mean,
There's no formula for Old Tom.
yeah, it is. Yeah, there's a.
No limitations,
Sorry.
no limitations on formula provided against they consider.
We put in a formulation approval and got it. It was sent back as not required.
They don't know what they're doing.
One of the other options
We
is
literally filled it out, sent it in, and it got rejected, and I was like, oh, what did we screw up? And they're like, not required.
Very nice. So Hayman, that's not your going to get a conference with you.
Right, as long as the rest is approved. On this one? Because Yarrow has 8,000.
What's the ABV there?
That's about 1/30th of the amount of food you
45.2.
Okay.
Right.
So you say Georgia.
But they don't care.
For that, because that's a culinary herb, everybody, it's okay.
Funny.
This is Valentine's, the Liberator gin.
Okay.
Another potential name is Reserve gin. That's used by some. So Citadel. I mean, this is aged gin now, but Citadel Reserve and Hayman's have a reserve, and Seagram's. Their reserve. Their distiller's reserve is pretty good gin, and it's
Antique.
Sorry.
There's an antique.
Antique.
Yeah, there's a guy who has a gin and then an antique.
Antique gin. Yeah, I can see. Yeah. Oh, yes, of course there is. Yeah. Yes. So there's a lot of variation.
David, which one's the one that's it's a major producer aging in Lillet bottles?
There's Beefeater with Burroughs Reserve. Another reserve. Burroughs Reserve. So reserve, I think, has some connotations to aged gin at the moment, but it doesn't say that it's aged as such. So that's potentially another one. I like amber. I like reserve. I think they're probably yellow is traditional. When Booze had theirs, it was described as yellow gin. If you look at like 50s and 60s books by people like Kingsley Amis and Dave Embry, they talk about yellow gin being, it's something like the connoisseur's choice. It's something like that. The gin aficionados, they all like yellow gin. And actually, those sort of early styles are, it's quite a soft element, but it just means that they can be mixed a lot more. Seagram's had their gin, which isn't any more aged, but was until 2010. I think they started off calling it ancient, and then it was golden, and now it's extra dry. But they went through other series. Yes.
Actually, the LDI distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, still does the Seagram's gin, and it's aged for 3 months in 3-time used bourbon barrels.
And they're still doing that now.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I have that one. I have a question. I probably said this before. I was
First
late.
for bourbon.
How many Old Tom gins do you think are available in the United States market?
For the gin.
Good question. Here I quickly count up. It's about 10.
10?
I think about 10. I think there's about 10. No, sorry, aged gins or Old Tom gins?
Old Tom gins.
Old Tom gins is about 10. Aged gin is probably about 30.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you, I'm a bartender, and I'll tell you something. There are so many mixologists right now who are wanting to do the old cocktails, and with the craft distillers in my area, I'm always like, make an Old Tom gin. We could really use that. You know, it's something that is lacking in our area, and you could do a lot with it. And as soon as it's introduced to the public, I know they would love it. It just needs to be put out there. I don't know. It's just, that's crazy. Only 10. Huh.
And that's, like, if you take the US as a whole, I mean, that in one state, I don't know that there necessarily will be anywhere where you could get all 10. Cause,
well, no, I mean, but just 10 in the whole United States is amazing. All right.
Were there any other questions?
How are they traditionally mixed?
So there are particular cocktails, and actually there's a couple in the preview of Forgotten Spirits and Long Lost Liqueurs.
See the White Mule press booth tomorrow. Pick up a copy.
But there's the Martinez, which is vermouth. I'll quickly read you the recipe so you have an idea. So it's 60 ml red vermouth, 30 ml Old Tom gin, 2 dashes of maraschino, 2 dashes of Boker's bitters. I mean, actually, then you've got another long lost ingredient as well for that particular recipe, and that is that's from Jerry Thomas. So you really had to. 10 years ago, you were really struggling to make that. And then there's Tom Collins, which is like your gin Collins, but you use Old Tom gin instead, and that's kind of.
You know what? I never knew that. I bartended too before I started making liquor, and Tom Collins, very common. But I just put that together. Old Tom Collins, were the gin and sweet and sour, and what is this? Soda water?
It's lemon, sugar, Old Tom gin.
Yeah, no sweet and sour.
And then
Tom Collins.
soda on top. Yeah.
Tom Collins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's the original recipe.
That's where the Tom Collins came from, was Old Tom.
Yeah.
Never knew that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? I'm intrigued as to what people like, because I know there's a huge range here, so I'll just do it by a very simple show of hands. But people that like the first one best, which was my one, so I'm sure you didn't like it, because I wouldn't like that one either. The second one?
I like the Hayman.
Yeah. The third one?
I like the third one too.
Yeah. Fourth? Fifth?
Yeah, I like that.
Sixth? And seventh?
Was that the bonus one?
No, the seventh wasn't the bonus one.
Seventh is Major Tom.
Yeah. And the eighth one, the bonus one, that is the bonus one.
I like the bonus one.
Okay, so I mean, it's interesting because there seems to be, people seem to equally like the different styles. I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, what you could have an argument about, this one's more authentic than this one, but I don't really think it's very productive because they are different for different things. What you would use the Ransom or the Sound Spirits for, or what you're using them for, what you're using the Jensens for, or the Haymans, or this one, what you'd use this one for, cleaning paintbrushes. They're very, very different, So so I think that it's encouraging to see that. All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. If you want to come and look at the bottles or taste anything or look at these bits I've got on here, and also I forgot even to show it, but this is actually an actual Old Tom gin bottle, which is Robert Burnett's, who do the White Satin, but this was their Old Tom as well. So this is an actual Old Tom gin bottle. But thank you very much.
Thank you.